Well, greetings of peace. This is the day that God has made, and truly we rejoice, and are glad in it. We thank God for God's mighty hand, God's loving kindness, and God's tender mercy. We thank God for God's divine orchestration, and we give thanks for another day, another Sunday to gather together again. I want to welcome everybody to the Globalcast Live Launch 2021, and I'm so glad to be here with Jeffery Beckham Jr. Jeff, you want to greet the people today?
Hello, everyone. Greetings. I hope you all are having a wonderful Sunday. This is, a cold day in Chicago where it's negative something outside, but hopefully you're warm inside watching and spending this afternoon with us.
Awesome. And it's pre-Super Bowl conversation today. And so, Jeff, I just want to thank you for joining us for this conversation. And we're really excited that you're with us. Globalcast. We have been producing so many great pieces of artwork and sharing them with us. I have one of my favorite pieces here in the back. Bridges Ruby Cross. And so, Jeff, can you just talk to us a little bit about your artwork and your commitment to telling our stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of going back to how I started would be helpful. I started painting a couple of years ago after the passing of a friend who was helping me at the time try to figure out and navigate whether or not I was going to run for office. I had the opportunity to interview for a potential appointment, state rep appointment in my district. And he was basically helping me figure out like all of the things to navigate, right? Like the Chicago political landscape, which can be very tricky for people that are new to that environment or people that have been kind of on the outside as an ancillary sitting in. I've done some fundraising, but never really myself considered hopping in until that point. So we had a conversation about like relieving stress and managing stress well. And, he asked me like, if you get this, what are you going to do to manage stress? And I was like, well, basketball, golf. And he's like, man, you're turning 40, bro. Your knees are old. Stop. He said, what else? And I was like, well, I used to paint. I used to draw as a kid and I love to get back into that. And he said, well, paint. I got a call a day later that he had passed away, 42, 43 years old, very young. And it just kind of stuck. I went in the back, got a canvas out the back that I had sitting there. It had been there for over maybe 2 or 3 years. The paint had, dried up. I put some water in it, and, painted, and then it was bad. The first piece was really bad, actually. But I stuck with it, and I kept painting, and I kept painting. And for the first year, I didn't really show much of what I was doing. I have like a bunch of acrylic pours and acrylic abstracts, which are different types of like technique that I learned. And then I decided to sketch this piece of a young lady, like in a green background. And I sketched that piece in October of 2019, but I didn't paint it till December and let it sit there kind of doubting my own ability, doubting whether or not I could paint it, whether or not it would come out well. When I painted it and shared it on social media, it kind of blew up. People were like, yeah, did you buy that? Where'd you get that from? And I shared that I had done it and kept going from there. And from that point, really into early 2020, starting to paint more, it really took off, and the support of friends and family, people that I didn't know. I think that was the other part too. Like folks would see the pieces and say, man, that's amazing. And it was humbling because I didn't, you do these things in the creative space and you create them, but you don't necessarily think like, oh, that's really good. It's a very personal thing when you share like your artwork or you share something that you've created. It's like you're a writer, so you get it, Reverend LaDonna, like you put your writing out there and you kind of just release it, and you don't know, you intend for something to go a message, but oftentimes people will write back with completely different things that they've seen in the pieces that I didn't intend for, or I didn't know that was there. And so 2 years since then, really since April, starting to actually sell the piece, the reception to the general public has been really, really powerful. The piece you have, the Bridges Ruby Cross piece, I've done two runs of that. The first run was 200 and it sold out in, less than a month and a half of limited prints. The second run we're in now of another 200, and that started at the first of the year, and we already are halfway through the prints. And so when I push these last 100 live, that'll be it for a while for that one. Maybe until a year or so, we'll hold off and kind of keep it kind of on lock. But yeah, it's been really interesting seeing how folks have signed up for, been part of, just wanting to kind of connect to the work.
Yeah, well, people heard it here that that's going to be your last one for a while, because I know yesterday in the book discussion, there were some moms that were there that they wanted to get this piece for their daughters, for their kids, so that they could see positive images of themselves. And I think you've talked about that a little bit, Jeff, about the importance of these images for us and for children.
Yeah, I mean, I think that has been the best part. Like initially, when I painted that piece, it really was to, turn on upside down on its head the Ruby Bridges story, which, if you're not familiar, Ruby Nell Bridges, segregated the William France Elementary School in November of 1960. She was young at the time. I think she was 5 or 6 years old. And, the strength that she displayed when you see this little brown girl surrounded by, what I assume are either security guards or National Guardsmen walking into school. And that's how she had to go to school, like every day. There's a piece that Norman Rockwell did of that image of her walking into the school. And next to they put the N-word. And that for me always bothered me when I saw that image. Why I understand like what Norman Rockwell was doing to convey the energy of the time. I don't think it actually depicted who that little girl was. And so what I try to do with all of the pieces and most of the ones I pick is convey the energy of how I see the people and how I feel like they should be portrayed and respected. With regard to who they are and who they were historically, and the people I paint now. It's gone everywhere. And the most interesting part is when I get a text message from like a friend or somebody that's like, my daughter has the piece on her wall and she woke up and asked, is that me? And I just told her yes. Or I sent it to one person who was in a school district in Kentucky, and now they've bought them for 25 of their students, and the students just love it. And you get these images of young Black children just lighting up at the piece, which is I think the best part. Like the most important piece of that is like mirroring and giving young people a focal point of who they can become.
Awesome. Well, listen, I want to talk about your most recent piece. I think I've shared with you, Jeff, how it's just really exciting. Every day you wake up, go to Instagram, see what you created, what you put out. And just the other day, you did a piece of Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Can you show us that, and let's talk about that? Especially on the Super Bowl Sunday, I think it's really important to hear and see this amazing piece.
Yeah, so that's the Colin piece there hanging on the wall behind me. Up that way and that right there. And again, it's interesting because I use this special fluorescent paint, and it actually allows the paintings to glow under either black light or like dark hued lights. So that piece glows in the dark. And again, when I started the background and the abstract, and that's what I'll do first. So typically I'll paint the abstract first, the background. And originally people were buying those. So I would paint the abstract, post it, and folks were like, oh, can I have that? And I'm like, sure. I didn't even know how to price them at first. And then I started, getting this idea like, oh, I should paint these figures over the abstract. And that's kind of what happened with Ruby Bridges, which was the first piece I did that with. And then after doing that, I did Angela Davis, and I did The Silent Strength, John Carlos and Tommy Smith, and Barack and Michelle Obama, the presidents. I did a few with them. I've done Chadwick Boseman, and I've got others that you haven't seen yet that are coming, like Fred Hampton and Malcolm X and Cicely Tyson and Rosa Parks and all these people. Actually, Rosa's kind of sitting back there, covered up the top of her head, and that's a big piece. Those pieces are big. But yeah, it allowed me to kind of again create what I was on the interview. I called it like neo abstract contemporary. It's just new and bright. But even with Colin, like I think, he's a fraternity brother of mine, right? So I think that energy was there. But then beyond that, like, he was thinking back now when he was, ostracized and effectively kicked out of the NFL for silently protesting, and then to see what happened in the world, you would almost say like they would ask him back now if to undo or unravel what happened when you're taking a knee. But I think Colin gets this from a lot of people in the world, this very kind of dark, drab energy they give him often. Even if you watch the Nike ads, it's like it's always black and white. It's always like very hard.
Right.
And all in things that I've heard, everybody that I know that knows him, other fraternity brothers, are like, he's actually a bright guy. He's a guy that's got like light energy. So that's part of why I painted that, again, to change the narrative, to help people be seen in a different perspective.
Okay, that's great. And is that going to be available on your website at some point?
Yeah, it will be. It was supposed to be yesterday. I haven't had a chance to take the pictures yesterday. The snow yesterday delayed a lot of the like little kind of finishing points. I was out at IKEA getting some stuff for the art gallery. And so, yeah, got caught out in that snow and ice. But by tomorrow, after the game, I'll go live with it tonight, and then it'll be up tomorrow, and I'll be able to push some out. So if you check my social media, you'll see it tomorrow. It'll be available.
Okay. Awesome. Well, if you're just joining us, this is Reverend LaDonna Sanders and Kosi, and I'm here on the Globalcast here at the Gathering Chicago Prayer Tower. And we're here with artist and community leader Jeffery Beckham Jr. So we want to welcome you. If you're in any of on our pages, just let us know where you're checking in from. We also do a global check-in, so we want to greet all our people from near and far, from all the continents. I see we have one person from Milton Keynes in the UK on here. So who else is on here? We want to welcome you. And we're talking about Jeffery Beckham's pieces and art pieces. And you can check his website to see them all at artbyjeffbeckham.com. So, Jeff, let's go back a little bit, because I think you said it really fast, but you've been painting for 2 years. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started. Brian's passing was like December 23rd or 25th. I never remember if he passed the day before Christmas Eve or the day after. And I think it was the 23rd. But yeah, that was the first, December 23rd, 2019. I had not painted before. In high school, I think I took some we did like composition, drawing. I'd done some like study of like abstract expressionism, some surrealism, like MC Escher stuff was stuff I liked. And you probably can see some elements of that sometimes too, with like geometric shapes and figures being kind of really prevalent in what I paint. It's funny, I remember that, and that was over 20 years ago. Miss Giovanni's class at Marian Catholic as a high school kid. But that ended after my junior year. High school kind of stopped taking art and focused on engineering and coding, which I did through most of my young adult life up until the last few years, working in the education nonprofit space. I actually currently serve as interim CEO of Chicago Scholars. And so it's actually a great coupling of relationship. I think our students who are in, definitely get a kick out of art, entertainment, see this other side of me where they get to see me in the suit and tie at work, and they get to see me with a brush, and I share both intentionally so that they can see that you can do both, that you can be passionate about what you do from 9 to 5 and have a passion from, 5 to 9 as well. it's important for me to kind of let them into both sides of the world. I also think it brings them closer to humanize us as well as adults. You know, young people see, you know, older folk now and they're like, well, yeah, you guys have made it. It's been easy, right? And when you see someone either through the challenges, the lens of challenge, or the lens of creativity, it humanizes you and it lets folks see you a lot differently.
Well, you talked about the power of us sharing our stories and telling our stories. And for me and for many of the people we've been talking to, as you share your paintings on social media and you share the stories, for example, your piece called Silent Strength, can you just talk about why it's important that these stories are told?
Yeah, oftentimes, you know, I'll be somewhere out and I'm always running. I'm usually doing something. That's like another thing about me too. Me and sitting still, don't do that way. Even when I'm sitting still, I'm using multitasking. I'm not right now, but it's rare that like I'm not doing something. And I think that that's just kind of like get that from my mom. Like she doesn't sit still either. But I was out at a protest. There was a faith protest here in Bronzeville, about 5,000 to 6,000 people just marching down King Drive. And I got home and I looked at some of the images that I took. I took my camera out and was shooting, you know, footage of folks, you know, protesting together, all races, different religions coming together. And it was a really beautiful evening. Like it was nice outside. But then, you know, there was a point where we stopped right on 35th and King Drive, and they started naming like Tamir Rice, Rakia Boyd, you know, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Martin. When you got through the list, there was so much power. You could feel something had kind of come over the crowd. A spirit of like resolute determination coupled with grief and the unsettled feeling that these Black and brown folks, mostly Black people, had been killed and gunned down, so many of them so young, before they had the opportunity to really fulfill all of what they could have accomplished had they, you know, been here. I got home, I got a canvas out, I sketched out like the outline of a protest. It was just like a silhouette, painted that. I had done the background earlier that week, and it was a really beautiful black background that looked like rain through the eyes of a window pane, like rain through glass. And it had a sad feeling to it. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. And after that protest, I sketched out the protesters as a silhouette over it. And I said, you know, and then I put, you know, Breonna Taylor's name in there, and it said, you know, no justice, no peace, and Black Lives Matter in the actual protest piece, which, you know, I think, again, coupled with the rain feeling of the background, again, speaks to we are sad, we will grieve, but we will not lay down. We will continue to fight for justice. And I think, you know, that piece was inspired by that. There's a piece I did in July, either June or July. It was the day of George Floyd's funeral. It's called I Cry for George. There's only one of those. There will only ever be one of those on purpose. When I painted the piece, the background, I did like purple from like Minnesota and royalty. Then there was like a gold overlay again, and for like the regalness. And then there was black. And when I did like this crying effect that I do, if you look at it, you can see that it looks like two people, a male and a woman, facing each other, both crying. And that's complete abstract. There's no sketch of a face, but everyone that sees it sees faces. And, you know, folks will ask, like, how do you come up with who you paint? Sometimes it's inspired by the moment. I sketched 2 Kobe Bryant pieces out last year, the day his plane crashed. I was actually recording my podcast when the helicopter went down, and that was the morning, like, we had a pivot, and we talked about Kobe. And then that night I went home and drew 2 pieces. One I finally finished right before Christmas. The other one I still have not finished yet. And the one is more abstract. The other was actually more of a portrait. And the one that's the portrait I haven't just been able to finish, but it was tied to, again, the moment, Chadwick Boseman in the moment. And it you know, I'd started sketching a Chadwick Boseman piece a long time ago. I had one for him I was sketching it while my mom was recovering from surgery in Mayo Clinic. I had one that I'd done. I haven't finished that one. I still have that one. It's actually here behind me. But the one that I finished was a completely different piece that I got inspired to do. So it sometimes things in a moment, sometimes it's a dream. I've dreamt pieces and gotten up and painted them. That's why I always say, like, it's not me. I'm just a vessel. I'm a vehicle. God has certainly given a lot of, all of that to me, and even the skill itself that I didn't know I had 2 years ago, which is, most people think I make that up. But my family and friends that know I wasn't painting. Most people expected me to run for office. That was the thing that folks thought I was going to do. It was on that path to do that in the encounter with Brian, who passed away. And, he, even in his death, did what he did in life, which was help people unlock their gifts.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask you actually about something that you've written regarding that time. Do you mind if I read it to you?
No, go ahead.
You said this: whatever the thing is that brings you peace and harmony, please do it. Being mindful of your mental and spiritual health is as critical as your physical well-being. So I encourage you to find your thing. Do you remember writing that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Leading an organization in the seat that I have the privilege to sit in, you get a lot of information, right? That's pretty much what, like, people are like, what do CEOs really do? We set culture and vision, and then we also digest information to make the right, decisions that align to strategic plans, right? So we help corral the plan, and then we make the decision. As part of that, one of the things that I've seen is the information with regard to how my students, how my mentors, how our stakeholders are really doing and handling this pandemic. And while they have been extremely strong and very resilient, including our staff as well, after a year, which we're almost approaching a year, I think we shut everything down. Maybe March 25th was the day that we said we're not going to come back into the office and that we would see everybody in a month. A year later, we're still not there. And I think what I've seen with the information I've been given, and even some of the data around student achievement in the city, is that the cracks are starting to show very, they're prevalent, and they're widening as fast as the achievement gap is widening in our city. And that, to me, is concerning. And in that piece that I wrote, it was really regarding telling folks that, it's okay, to not be okay, but it's also okay to acknowledge that we're not just working from home. I think people get that messed up. Like, oh, you working from home, you should be good. We're working from home in the midst of a global pandemic. This isn't a choice. It is something that we have been forced to do. And when you're forced to do something like that, it does have an effect on your mental well-being and your spiritual well-being. And so you have to practice, just like, when we came home initially, the gym's closed. I was still do a couple times a week, 150, 200 push-ups with a group of guys. We've been doing it for 47 weeks, 48 weeks. Wow. We all started riding bikes this summer. I was out doing 60, 70 miles a week on my bike outside. We adapted to the world from the physical perspective. The question that I ask, and I still ask, is, did we do the same thing from a mental and a spiritual perspective? I think, a lot of churches obviously went virtual, right? And so it is hard when the church, and the word church, if I remember correctly from Latin and Greek, means community and people, means body. And you're not connected through the communing that happens on Sunday or in Bible study or in choir. That can break you in the same way, in regard where if you're not in the gym and you're eating what you've been eating, you haven't changed your diet, you haven't changed the process and procedure by which you live, it'll crack, and those cracks will start to show. And I think spiritually and mentally, a lot of folks are dealing with that and haven't slow down. Like, the pandemic made me slow down. It made me look in the mirror. It made me say, I need to lose weight. It made me say, I've got people around me that aren't not they're not bad people. Nobody was like, I want to make sure I say that. But we weren't progressing in the way which God had told me I'm supposed to go here. I'm supposed to be, I'm headed down this path. This is the path that I'm supposed to be on. And I'm still being pulled because I've got folks around me that I hadn't looked to see that we kind of have gone down some different paths in what we want and hope to achieve in life. And that's okay. That happens. Our paths are our paths. Like you can't fault folk. You can't, there's reasons, seasons, and lifetime. And I think God often will move you. And if he's trying to move you, or he's trying to elevate you, or he's trying to get your attention, in the quarantine, we had to shut down. We were in the house. So you look in the mirror and you're like, man, this wasn't the path that I was supposed to be on. And, everybody talks about the power of the pivot. For some people, I don't think it was a pivot as much of a realignment of your steps are ordered and you on somebody else's stairwell. I mean, that, and so that time for a lot of folks, that's what happened. It wasn't just businesses. The world reset, the globe reset. You hear these stories about how like our entire environmental perspective from air quality got better, that the fog was clearing in LA, that some of the things happened with regard to global warming had started to reverse. And we're talking about people being inside for 90 days, 60 days. I can't say, I don't think God brings plagues to us after Jesus, right? That if the theologians say that the last fall was Christ's death, he paid the cost. So, you can't blame this thing on God to say God did this, but oftentimes God will use something or allow the enemy to have, reign a little bit so that he can use it for the glory of getting our attention and getting us back right? Job, I'm gonna take my hand. Okay, I'm gonna test. We see what you gonna do. I know my servant Job. Job is faithful. Just watch. So the enemy comes and he takes Job's wife, his kids, his house, his job, everything. Job stays faithful, gets it returned back tenfold, right?
Right.
And I think, and I love that story. My initials are JOB. My parents probably named me that on purpose. I think I've had a lot of Job moments. I feel like the globe is in a Job moment. And God is like, I'm just going to see if y'all are going to stay faithful. Are you going to remain faithful to what I've called and told you all that you're supposed to be doing? The church, are you going to stand up in this time? Have you gotten so caught up in personality and big buildings that you're going to forget how to operate? That, my word is all you need. This the bread of life. The source is right in our books, our phones these days.
Right.
I think that a lot of what's occurred is to wake us up, and hopefully people are waking up.
Wake up time and realignment. Jeff, how did the pandemic, or along with what you're saying, how did this affect your artwork, and how did it affect your vocation?
Man, that's a good question. I think from the art perspective, it gave me time to practice. Like I needed to sit down and practice. And there were things that I had to learn with regard to art. I'm very analytical in terms of my approach to work. I'm an engineer. Right? I kind of have like the best of both worlds with my parents. My dad is an engineer and very technical. My mom is kind of the people person, amiable. She's a nurse, still scientific, but a nurse. And I think that like I've combined and done both parts of their work to some degree, working in healthcare and tech to kind of get me here. And so I approached art originally like very in the same this, and you get the finished product. That is not how art works. It's kind of like brushstroke here, throw this here. You have to really kind of cut the ties that you're tied to and everything to get these, things that come out on canvas. The Ruby Bridges piece was an accident. It was actually me practicing. I was just throwing colors on canvas. I was taking a class actually on understanding contrasting, using warm and cold color to contrast and create like this, paradigm in terms of backgrounds and how you paint. And so that's what that was. It was like warm and cold colors and contrast. And in the end, I kind of layered it out, and I looked, and I had this cool. It's a very small piece. The original was 16 by 20. It's this big.
It's big.
It's very small because it was a practice piece, and
Okay.
I was gonna throw it away. I know it sounds insane. I was gonna throw it away. I actually thrown canvases away, and I've done that. And then I've looked at, actually, my neighbor has 2 pieces of mine in their window in the back that I threw out that were practice pieces. And that one was one that I looked, and I said, well, let me paint this little girl. And when I did that and I shared it, the response, I was like, whoa, this is actually really beautiful. And it makes, I don't know who painted it, the actual piece, but if you remember the Cosby Show, there's a piece of the family walking at the funeral. I should know the name of that piece. That piece actually reminded me of that when I stepped back from it myself, and I was like, whoa, that was probably the first thing. And I was like, that's actually a really powerful thing that I just created there. And I was going to throw it away, and it was practice. And so to answer your question, the time that I had this summer will allow me to kind of step back and practice to get better at sketching, get better at shading, get better at shadows, and using, different types of mediums with acrylic paint to create other effects. In terms of vocation, the pandemic also gave me, I think there's this element of having to trust yourself. When you're kind of away from everybody and you get time alone, you get an opportunity to kind of trust yourself in terms of, are you who you are called to be? Are you walking in that space? But then also, like, with terms of skill set, like, you got to kind of rely on yourself for a lot of things in the pandemic. And I think from a vocation standpoint, it allowed me to study and do some of the work that I needed to do, not just on the painting side, but also like on the education front, and understanding, like, doing deeper dives and understanding the college landscape and the inequities that exist in that landscape. The landscape of Chicago. I've been studying the last few years the historical context of why inequity exists in our city. It's such a massive way where, like, you can literally look on a map and see the life expectancy in Inglewood at 67 and in Lincoln Park at 83. And we're talking in 5 miles. I can ride my bike. I've ridden my bike in less than an hour from Inglewood to Lincoln Park. The life expectancy has a 17-year difference. Wow. Why does that exist? Why is that occurring? Why is that even allowed to happen in a city with so many resources? And so the time that I had allowed me to go deeper in the historical context and the learning that I needed to learn, and some things that I needed to unlearn growing up in, white cultural norms and corporate cultural norms, where, I was probably in alignment many years back with some of the pull your pants up mentality, where I also now understand that was absolutely the wrong thought process and approach. I still have my belief that there is something to infiltrating and disrupting, but I think you can infiltrate being yourself. I think you can open doors and walk inside, bringing your full identity to the places we walk into, not having to change up, not having to, fake who you are, to be in spaces. And then when you're there, be great at what you do and who, the work that you're there to do. And you do open doors that way. It's a long play. It's a horribly long play. It doesn't disregard systemic racism and systematic oppression like that. Those things are there. But I think that, and I say this often, like, well, I'm not going to send a student to walk into an organization that's not going to be welcoming to them. There are enough organizations that want them now with regard to jobs, and they want our young people there. They're willing to do the work to change the culture and the environment. That's who we need to partner with. It's like, we don't have to knock on this door. We can knock on these, or these doors. These doors are open to us. We don't even have to knock. They're open. And I think that that's a shift for me to happen too, not recently, but over the past. I mean, I think that's the last few years working in the environment that I work in. You know, I have a bunch of dynamic, brilliant young people who are on my staff who are like, no, this is what we wanted. We're not changing. You know, sometimes that can be a problem too, but more often than not, it's like, it's a good push. It's a necessary push. It's a necessary, the amount, how vocal they are. I appreciate that, because I came up in, you know, the end of the baby boomer led environment where it was like, you fit in where you fit in, you're quiet. Young employees are seen, not heard. You wear blue in a white shirt every day, blue tie, no earrings, no facial hair, no nothing. Like, come to work, do your job, go home, and pay your dues to get promoted. And then we never got promoted anyway. You pay all these dues, and you were passed over every single time anyway. So you know, I kind of like the new approach of using our voice and bringing our whole self to the environment. I think that you know, that level of disruption that we've seen has made some change.
Jeff, we're going to go to commercial break. And our commercial break is, we have a couple of advertisements we're going to talk about. If you're just joining us, this is Reverend LaDonna Nkosi, and I'm here at the Gathering Chicago Prayer Tower. We're in conversation with Jeffery Beckham Jr. And Jeff, I want us to do a commercial break for Chicago Scholars, to tell people what Chicago Scholars is and how they can connect in. Also, if you're on here now and you want to let us know where you're coming in from, and also if you have any questions or comments for us, please, we can see your comments and questions, so be welcome to add them in. But we're going to have a commercial break for Chicago Scholars, and then I'm going to do a commercial break for the Healing Racism Journaling Experience.
Yeah, well, great. Thank you. First, for those of you out there that has a current CPS junior that is a high academic performer that needs support getting to college, through college, and into career, then Chicago Scholars is the place for you. Our program over the last 25 years has worked with over 4,000 young first generation and or low income students from Chicago to help them get through school, build leadership skills, and find the jobs that they can go into to take the world over. We have some amazing young talent who have done some awesome things all over the globe. And right now we're recruiting our next crop of scholars who will graduate from college in the year 2026, which is crazy to even say that and hear that term and how far out that is. And so we're looking for scholars, we're looking for mentors, we're looking for career partners who want to hire some of these dynamic, awesome, high-performing young people this summer. And if you have any questions or comments and want to learn more about Chicago Scholars, reach out, chicagoscholars.org, and at Chicago Scholars on all the social channels. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I don't know if I mentioned to you, but one of my key focuses is mentoring programs. And I myself am definitely a benefactor of mentoring programs from high school through college at Mizzou, all the way in through my doctorate. So we're really excited about what you all are doing at Chicago Scholars. And I understand you also are looking for mentors. Is that correct?
Yeah, looking for mentors too. We have about 250 mentors we bring in every year who are adult volunteers that work with our students in that first year, the senior year of high school and that first year of college. It's like the transition, the bridge year. And they help with like social, emotional support, coaching, leadership, helping them kind of get that job focus. Like, what do you need to do to get the internship? All of those things. And so it's a real dynamic program. I wish that it did exist when I was in school. I just didn't know about it back in the day, but we've grown too. So we're looking for 500 to 600 young people, 200 mentors. You mentor in a cohort, so don't feel like you have to take it all on yourself. You will have 2 to 3 other mentors with you that will help you work with 7 or 8 young people, which is a very interesting way. I've appreciated I've mentored for the program, and I've appreciated that space and doing it that way, because obviously you may relate more with certain young people than others. And typically we do interest-based kind of putting folks together. It's like Match.com a little bit, and matching our mentors to our young people based on things they like and things that they're interested in. And so you typically we'll have something to discuss with the young people that are part of your cohort.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So listen, I want to share also with everyone that we are offering a Healing Racism journaling experience. And you can see that here. It's going to be on February 20th at 2:00. It's a virtual experience, and you can register for that on Eventbrite. You can also reach out to us at thegatheringchicago.org. And we actually just had our first one in January, at the end of January, and it was absolutely amazing. We had poetry, we had the voices of the ancestors from Dr. Martin Luther King. It was just powerful. And one of my issues or concerns in doing this work of healing racism is that there's such a focus on learning or talking to people, telling them that racism actually exists. But there's not a lot that goes into providing spaces where people who are dealing with racism trauma can deal with being healed regarding racism trauma. So we want to invite you all to come out to that, and we'll also be hosting one in March. All right. So healing racism from the inside out. So Jeff, I'm working actually, that's my project for my doctoral program in the Right Scholars. And my thesis would be that your artwork and actually telling these stories is a part of healing racism. It's a part of healing, healing racism. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think even in the approach to the art and narrative and story, kind of owning narrative and making sure that it's accurately told was part of why I started painting. And I've painted some of the people that I have. I think I had shared with you, I was at the New Teacher Center, and we went and did a training. It was an interesting training, right? They took all of the staff, all of us that were, at New Teacher Center from across the country, about 300 people. And they took us out to Calabasas, where, New Teacher Center was actually near Silicon Valley, Santa Cruz, California. And we did like a 2-day training where it was like, we went through Glenn Campbell's Courageous Conversations, Glenn Singleton, Courageous Conversations About Race. Which is a book that's supposed to help those in the education field like work to achieve equity. And we did the one thing you do. I don't know if you all have seen this video where like the guy has the dollar and he's like, take 2 steps forward if you had both parents growing up. And in the end, you look and it's like all the white kids are up front, all the black kids in the back or middle. And then he's like, now race to me and get the dollar, right? And it's like, it's pretty easy for you guys up front to come get this dollar. But for those kids in the back, most of the black and brown kids, it's very difficult. Like, it's hard. And he said, this is the way the world's set up. So we did that as a staff, right? You have, I think I was one of 2 black men that worked at the entire organization. And they had us do a test where you got points for, fill this out if you've never been arrested, fill this out if you've never been harassed, take a point if you feel that your neighborhood is completely safe. Take a point if you have never had a challenge getting a mortgage, because like there was all these things. And when you looked up, they were like, everybody keep your score to yourself, keep your score quiet. We're gonna line you up by score. And so they lined us all up. And you literally saw it was white, Asian American, Latinx, black. And the person that was dead last in the line was me. And, it's this, the interesting thing about doing race work in particular as a person of color, when you're trying to lead it, is that it can lead you feeling weathered and othered often, right? Weathering meaning, if you think about like a rock, and water hitting a rock over time, that rock will get weathered. No matter how the mountains were formed because of water and erosion, and it will erode you, even the strongest individual. At this point, I'm standing there looking at this room, and I think I was probably eroded to some degree by all of the folks around me. And so I felt compelled to speak up because, it's just, that's my genetic makeup. You got to say something. And so I got the mic, and, it's 200 of my staff coworkers, and I'm the lone black male. And I was like, so I want to be very clear that while you all see me standing here last in line, I am the exception. And I recognize that. I know that I have had privilege. Both parents went to college, had the best schools. And so if you all are, it was tears. It was like, all the tears in the world. They were crying and sad. I'm like, if you're crying for me, please don't. Because all the kids that we serve are on the other side of me. And they're kids that are thousands and thousands and thousands of points and light years away from me. So cry because of that. And that this world that we've structured and created, all of us together, but some of those in power in particular, have created a world where these young people will never have the opportunity to stand where I am at the end of the line amongst all of you. And, you get the, I'm so sorry afterward. I'm like, what are you apologizing for? Like, none of y'all, did this. And I'm good. Like, fall back. But the book in that day, examine narrative. That was kind of how they opened up, and they told the Rosa Parks story. And they were like, how many of y'all think you know the Rosa Parks story? Raise your hand. So everybody. And the lady started asking. So the white people were like, Rosa Parks was an old black woman who decided that one day she wasn't gonna sit at the back of the bus anymore. And she was like, okay, how old do you think Rosa Parks was when she decided that she wasn't gonna sit on the back of the bus anymore? And they were like, well, we don't know, not quite sure. So then they asked her, so was this the first time that Rosa decided that she wasn't gonna sit on the back of the bus anymore? And like, man, we really don't know. This is crazy. And so the lady kind of breaks down the story, right? That Rosa that day, this wasn't something that was random, that it was actually planned, strategic approach that the NAACP at the time worked with her on, and that Rosa actually wasn't the first person to do this, that they had tried before, but in almost every other time they wouldn't arrest, or they would just do. So this was like a strategy to get this done. And I think the other crazy part about that too is like Rosa was like 42 years old. So, she wasn't old at all. I think, that was 1955 and she was born like 1913. But when you hear the strategy that was put behind this, and that there was really a well thought out plan of action for this, it made me realize that folks don't know the real story of a lot of the history that is American history, not Black history, American history. Yes, it's Black history too, but how our country was built, how our country changed, the door that opened for Dr. King and other civil rights leaders to work with LBJ on the Civil Rights Act, and the things that happened from that. It was strategic. And so those conversations about race have really kind of been the driving force behind why I've chosen some of the art and pieces I have and painted the people that I have.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to, along that lines, ask you about a few pieces. For example, the piece Silent Strength. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so Silent Strength, Dr. John Carlos and Tommy Smith. Again, another piece that it wanted to highlight the narrative. And I think I painted that one in the midst again while thinking about like the world outside my neighborhood in Chicago was really on fire, like looting and rioting was happening. And my brain just went right to Colin Kaepernick thinking like, and they thought his protest was too radical. And it made me think back to the picture of the two men with the gloves and the fist up on the gold and bronze, podium. And I painted that over the American flag with the stars crying, because I feel like they really, tried to ostracize and give Dr. Jeremiah Wright a hard time about his comments, the chickens come home to roost. But I think what we've seen this summer, and even leading into, where we are now, is a lot of chickens coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And that piece for me was one that said, well, you got to fix this thing that's been broken. That folks are more offended by that image that I painted of a flag with crying stars
Come on.
than they are of a noose hanging in the Capitol building. That folks are more offended of me writing Black Lives Matter on the ground outside of 75th Street in Chicago than they are with folks putting Klan paraphernalia and saying they want to hang and lynch Nancy Pelosi or Congress folks for disagreeing with the president who has done, former president who did nothing but, spew things that were hateful, right? And again, this isn't a political conversation. I don't want it to go there, but I want to be very clear that, like, what are we really mad at with the messaging? What were we mad at with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee when he said it wasn't to disrespect troops nor the flag, that he put his hand over his heart still while he took the knee, that the knee was to bring light to what was happening to people of color who were being attacked, assaulted, and killed by police at a astronomically abnormal rate than the white counterparts. He wasn't asking, even the ask that he didn't make initially was just to try to look at it, open your eyes to see it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it took 8 seconds and a knee to the neck of a Black man in Minnesota for folks to say, this is not right. And it's unfortunate that had to happen again. And then we had to see it again. And we keep seeing it all the time. Like that, I think that is the part that is the frustrating component there, and why the pieces that I paint, you can feel that sometimes. There is a energy around some, I'm competitive. I was an athlete. I played sports, and I think sometimes that energy comes out in what I paint too.
Okay. Shifting over to, I want to talk about the power of naming. Because when I'm looking at this Bridges Ruby Crossed picture, and you're also painting Rosa Parks. On the people may not be able to see it, but on Bridges Ruby Cross, you have the word Queen written across the picture. In your is it Until Kings Rise? You have the king naming Emmett Till as king, and then you can say about Rosa Parks, because we haven't seen it, but you talk about whether or not you're going to have her prisoner number on her. And I think there's a power in naming, and that there's a lot of power in that. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that intentional, these things that you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. That certainly was. I think that, like, power of life and death is in the tongue, and we can speak those things so that they are. And I think that for me was important to, in terms of changing the narrative, like visually seeing it attached to that image now, so that hopefully one day when I'm long gone from here, that image will now be the prevalent image of who Ruby Bridges was, more so than like Norman Rockwell, which is a lofty goal, but it is my goal. And the same thing with Emmett Till. When we see this little boy from the south side of Chicago, we won't think of his death. We'll have more context to understand who Bobo was, right? Like, that was his nickname, that he was funny, that he was a kid, pranked people, that he played jokes, that he liked games, that he liked music. Like, these are the things that folks never talk about when they talk about Emmett Till. That is why, I want us to see it and see the context of who these people were. I'm doing one with Trayvon Martin, and Trayvon would have been 26 years old, I believe, yesterday or the day before. To think about that and how that time doesn't feel like that was that long ago, but like, this was a kid. George Zimmerman didn't kill a grown man, and not that either would have made it differently. He shot a kid, one of our children. That is why I want to use language to really own who these folks were. Language matters. Words do matter. We've learned anything over the last 4 years. We know words really matter. And so the power of language with regard to the pieces I paint and the connection to the words that are labeling them, it's important for us to change the label.
Changing the label, words matter, language matters. Yeah, I can relate to that definitely as a poet, and definitely the images that you paint, they make an impression and leave a lasting impression. Well, Jeff, our hour is about up, and there's so many things that we could be talking about, but I really want to celebrate something that you have coming up because you're opening an art gallery. Is that correct? Your studio show coming up. So can you let us know about that and how people connect in with you?
Yeah, so this week, again, tomorrow, there'll be a link on my website, artbyjeffbeckham.com, where you'll be able to register for your time to come view the work at our studio. I say our because I have a partner, Mike Jew, who I own it with, and we'll have my work there, but I'm also bringing in some other young African-American artists to kind of celebrate Black History Month, the Heroes Live in Color theming of that, folks that are considered or could be considered heroes for the culture will be featured, and it'll run from the 17th of February through March. And the reason being is that I want to make sure that we can do this where folks can register time to see the work, but also social distance, have masks, all of that good stuff. The good part is that there's no food in there, so you will be in there with your mask on, looking at work, and then walking through the leaf. So we can keep people safe. I don't want to have any super spreader events, every part of that. So yeah, we'll be able to do that. And then hopefully this summer when we get back to, or next fall, more likely than not, get back to some normalcy, we'll be able to do larger shows, get folks in to gather and get together and have some food, break bread there too. But for now, it's nice because you can come in. It's a big room, just a square room. You can walk through and walk out, see the pieces. Order prints if you like to do that there too. You'll be able to order prints, and I'll have some limited inventory on site too as well to purchase. But it'll be, again, you got it up there below me here, artbyjeffbeckham.com. And you can see all the pieces too as well. All of the ones we've talked about are on that site, with the exception of the Colin Kaepernick, which will be up, and the Rosa Parks Beach, which will be up there probably later this week. Those two, Colin tomorrow, Rosa probably by the end of the week. I got to finish her, but yeah.
That's the one I want, the Rosa Parks.
That one. It's gonna be good, and it's so big. I think that's part of why I just haven't finished this. Like it's a I think 40 by 60 canvas that I have for her.
Wow,
so that's the biggest one in the group.
All right. Well, before we go, I have to ask you a LaDonna question, and that is, how does it feel, Jeff, to be doing your art gallery, to be seeing your pieces around the world? How does it feel?
Very humbling. It is definitely it feels great to know that like something you create inspires people. That for me was like kind of mind blowing. Like you see the gift or the little, emoji of the, I feel that way sometimes when I get responses from folks that are like, man, you painted something and it really spoke to my daughter and she's motivated and doing better in school. My son saw the Kobe Bryant piece and waking up every morning, like that's the mentality he's been going at it with.
Wow.
That piece, that's the best part of all of this, is the response back. Also, the ability that I have to give kudos to the people who came before me and did this. My dad, my parents, who have been instrumental in terms of like helping shape me and grow up. I mean, the opportunities that they gave me. I remember taking art classes as a little kid at the Hyde Park Art Center, right? Like I do remember those things. And it's funny how like I think the other end of it too is that like being able to prove to yourself and disprove theories that you told yourself about who you are or who you aren't. right? Like literally heard people say, I'm not creative. Kids that tell me that I'm not creative. And I shared a story like, I didn't think I was either. I could do graphic design, but I didn't know I could do any of this. And so hold off on what you tell yourself. God might have a completely different plan for you, right? And that piece in all of this is probably the best part.
Wow, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we're about to wrap up. I think we could go on and on. So I already asked you, Jeff, if you would come back
Sure.
to continue the conversation. But as we get ready to close again, this is Reverend LaDonna Sanders and Kosi, and I just really want to, first of all, thank you, Jeff, for joining us for the first Globalcast. I want to let everyone know that we're going to be having a series throughout February and into March, April, and beyond. And when we're able to get over to the other side in South Africa, we'll be broadcasting from there as well. Also want to let you know that we're in 28 days of poems, original poems with Rev L. So look out for that on our page at The Gathering Chicago. Jeff, is there anything else you have going on or anything you want to say for the people before we check out?
No, just thank you for, doing this and lending energy to this in space for folks who have things that they're doing and producing and voices. I think that it's important. And so, yeah, your storytelling and giving us space to tell stories. So I appreciate that. And lastly, to Mizzou shout out to as well, to a fellow Tiger. That's my Mizzou degree right there. I'm proud of. And to see us moving and doing this is really, really exciting for me. So I'll be watching and tuning in for your future Globalcast.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Well, everybody, I want to ask you to share this, encourage someone today and in these days. And we look forward to connecting back in with you again soon. God bless you and keep you, and we will see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.